Claire Scriven, MLC, lives in the southeast and is not up for election yourself this state election, Claire, but got plenty to say about the Marshall Liberal government's record in South Australia, especially in the regions.
Yes, that's right. As you mentioned, I live regionally in the southeast, and I'm Shadow Minister for Primary Industries and for Regional Development, so all things very dear to my heart. I think it's fair to say that a lot of people in regional areas in particular have been pretty dissatisfied with the way that things have played out over the last almost 4 years, and in particular the last 2 years where regional voices really just haven't been listened to when decisions have been made about reactions to the pandemic and restrictions and so on. So I think there's a fair level of dissatisfaction with the current government.
Well, on the regional front, Peter Malinauskas, the Labor leader, has made a few visits with health a focal point. Let's talk about Limestone Coast Health first of all, your local patch. What's the focus there in terms of spending and commitment, say, for the Naracoorte Hospital?
Right, so the Naracoorte Hospital upgrade is part of the more than $52 million investment that we will make into the Limestone Coast region for health if Labor is elected in the March election. So instead of spending $662 million on a basketball stadium in Adelaide, Labor has said that at least $100 million of that money will go to country health. So we've announced an $8 million upgrade to the Naracoorte Hospital. That'll be the first stage of a major redevelopment. And I think everyone in the region knows that Naracoorte Hospital has needed an upgrade for quite a long time. So this is really welcome. We're also going to be doing a 7-year commitment to the Keith Hospital, which has had ongoing uncertainty over its funding, and also paramedics and ambulance officers. There's going to be an additional 24 across the region, and what that means is we're going to have an extra 24 paramedics and ambulance officers across the region, and that will include a new 24-hour, 7 days a week paramedic crew based in Mount Gambier, and 2 new regional transfer crews, one based in Keith and one based in Mount Gambier. And that's really important because we don't want to be tying up sort of active ambulance officers with transfers. So having those additional crews will really relieve a lot of the pressure on our hospitals and on our ambulance crews.
What about the Kingston Hospital had to close for what I hear for locally about 3 or 4 days? What does that tell us about the state of regional health, and have you got a spending commitment for the Kingston Hospital?
Look, I think, there's a number of hospitals have closed, and the reasons given have been, this is in a number of different areas, and the reasons given have been because of COVID and that they're attached to aged care facilities. Now, I did raise that in Parliament with the Health Minister towards the end of last year, because it's really, we need to have the appropriate things in place to make sure that simply because an aged care facility is co-located, that doesn't mean that local people need to miss out on their hospital services. So I think that really is an indication of what some of the things that need to be addressed. Our first stage is looking at the Naracoorte Hospital and the Keith Hospital, and then of course down the track we can look at other things if we are indeed elected in March. Of course, a lot of people go down to Mount Gambier for their services, and we've made a whole lot of announcements in regards to Mount Gambier as well. We're going to be upgrading the hospital there, particularly the emergency department. And also, both mental health and drug and alcohol, they're big issues for our region, and I think it's fair to say most regional areas. So we're going to be having doubling the mental health beds based in Mount Gambier, and also having 2 detox beds. And that's something that people have been calling for quite a long time. At the moment, if you want detox, generally you have to go up to Adelaide. So there will be 2 local detox beds, as well as 4 additional community-based drug and alcohol beds. So all of those things, I think, for the region are very, very good. As I mentioned, $52.7 million investment into all of those health services across the Limestone Coast.
Now, across the state, there's been this running challenge regarding the availability of doctors, the use of locums. The state government announced just before Australia Day they'll invest $188 million over 2 years, a 20% increase in funding, they say, to attract and retain GPs in regional SA. Is this a reactive or a proactive announcement from the state government?
Well, it's an announcement that's been certainly a very, very long time coming. I think it's at least 18 months, possibly a bit more, that the rural doctors have been trying to negotiate agreements with the government that would go some way to fixing the lack of medicos in regional areas. I think the reaction from the regional medical people was, I think, lukewarm, to say at best. They don't seem to consider that it goes far enough and that it's been just too long in coming. I think we need to have more of a really holistic look at the reasons that we're not getting medical people coming to our regional areas. And look, a lot of regional GPs are under huge strain. They're working so hard, and that's just not really sustainable or fair for them. So, I'm glad there's finally been some sort of offer made to them, but I think I can only reflect what doctors are saying is that it's really not going to fix the problem.
Now, the rapid antigen tests, there's some deployment sites, I think there's 6 maybe or 7 across regional SA. Are they enough, and were they rolled out fast enough?
Well, this again comes back to Premier Stephen Marshall saying back in November that the state was ready to be opened up, and yet he had no plan at all for rapid antigen tests. And we saw that, a site was eventually opened up, but that was up in Adelaide, so for people in my region, a 450 kilometre drive each way. So that really wasn't any help to them, and it was much later that we did then get some rapid antigen testing pick-up sites in regional areas. Now, of course, that's only for people who have registered with SA Health because they're close contacts and those other kind of conditions that are attached to that. But again, we don't seem to have enough. So, for example, in the mid-north, there is nothing. So if you live in Clare, you've got to either go 190 kilometres to Port Augusta or 120 kilometres to Salisbury. That's pretty rough, particularly if you're thinking that you might actually have symptoms and be coming down with the virus. We don't want people travelling all over the state if they think they might be sick. Similarly, we have got one at Narracourt, but if you're at Kingston, that's 100 kilometre each way, 200 kilometre round trip, or if you're at Bordertown, it's 80 kilometres each way. It's not really, I think, taking into account the distances that regional people have to travel. And again, we've got to remember these are people who have been close contacts, so they might be infectious, and or they've got symptoms, and so making people then travel hundreds of kilometres to actually get a rapid antigen test to see if they then need to isolate is obviously just not a good idea. We need to have more of them, and they need to be more easily accessible to people so they don't have to travel long distances. Remember too, of course, some people don't have transport; they simply can't get there. So again, we've seen quite a number in the city. Look, that's good. Obviously, we need to have pick-up points in Adelaide, but we need to have more of them in the regions.
Now, Labor today, the opposition are talking about they've seized on the Tourism Industry Council's announcement that basically tourism businesses feel like they needed more help and still need more help during the pandemic. The Agriculture Minister, Primary Industries Minister David Basham's put something out about helping rural youth ambassadors, 130,000, and says he looks forward to country shows getting back underway again. Has the state government done enough to help regional tourism and country shows keep operating or operate in a COVID-safe way?
Well, I think the number of country shows that have had to be cancelled is an indication that there hasn't been enough. I know until this point, I think the only funding has been from the federal government. I'd have to check that, but that's my understanding. And so many rural shows have had to be cancelled. But I think even more than that, that's one aspect, and that's important. But in terms of the assistance for hospitality businesses, retail businesses, many of which are just struggling so much, a number of which have closed their doors, I think the proof is in the pudding. The sort of reaction that we're getting from that business sector, and particularly the small business sector, is that no, there hasn't been enough help. We need to remember that small businesses are the backbone of our whole state, and yet they haven't been having the level of assistance that they need, and also the changes in rules and the confusion around rules, that they haven't had the level of communication that they need to be able to stick to the rules, make sure that their customers are doing so, and still operate a business in a way that at least turns a bit of a modest profit. So I think there really are almost on their knees, many of them. I think that was a description that I heard on radio this morning from a couple of small businesses. So it really is very, very hard for them, and we're not seeing a long-term vision from this government. All we've got from them is they're going to build a $662 million basketball stadium in the city. What's the long-term vision? How are we actually going to support businesses to not only survive for however long COVID continues, but to actually thrive and expand and be creating jobs yet again?
Now, just lastly, I think if my memory serves correctly, you filled the last slot in the Legislative Council last election. It was a pretty close one in the end, but
yes, it was.
Very tight and nail-biting stuff. Tom Kenyon, former stablemate of yours in the Labor Party, he's running as an independent for a brand called Family First. How's it going to shape up? Is there any concern about facing up against Tom Kenyon? Not yourself. You'll have someone on your ticket running against him, maybe for that last slot in the Legislative Council.
Look, I think minor parties have been a part of the South Australian landscape for some time now. What Labor is doing is concentrating on what our vision for the state is, that we really want to be offering to the South Australian public an alternative to the current government, which has really achieved very little in their 4 years in government. We're talking about what we can do for the future. And then the South Australian public will judge us on that, and that'll obviously translate into the upper house as well as the lower house. So I think we just need to wait and see how that plays out. All we can do is talk about what we want to achieve for the state and hope that resonates with people. And we've been listening very hard over the last 4 years to what people want, and hopefully the policies that we're offering are the things that they want.
Well, Claire Scriven, thanks for that. Look, I've got to keep moving. I much appreciate your time today, and we'll hopefully catch you again soon just before the election in March.
Okay, great talking with you.